Hello, I'm Natasha. Welcome back to the channel. And I believe that the UK is sadly no longer a safe country. I recall an interview with President Putin on RT back when RT was allowed to broadcast in the UK. And Putin stated that in Europe they allow bandits on the street. And it seems that the Russian president knew more about the situation in the UK back then than British leaders themselves. But it is worrying that we've had some serious acts of violence committed recently by people who are not from the country. And I find it despicable that mainstream media tries to cover up that these awful crimes are being perpetrated by foreign nationals. Let's be honest, the country is in a state of emergency. We don't know who is on the streets anymore, and it doesn't seem that people who are arriving are being checked at all by the authorities. A very worrying situation for people living in the UK. We need to remember that the purpose of the government is to protect and provide safety. That is the oldest and simplest justification for a government to protect its citizens, and this is no longer happening in the UK. My main priority as a person is safety, feeling safe and secure when I go out on the streets. And I do believe that this is where countries like China and Russia are doing better than the UK. And I would argue that they are reflecting the will of the people in terms of reflecting the principal desires of people to feel safe and secure. Now, from my other videos, you can see that I voted for reform in the recent general election. They were really the only option for me. But I do follow some right-leaning commentators in the UK, and there is a split in the right in Britain, obviously between Conservative voters and Reform voters. And then also from following alternative media outlets, I can see that there are people voicing their support for other parties like UKIP. And I guess this concerns me slightly because if we start splitting the right vote in the country, then the left will be guaranteed to stay in power. And I don't know about you, but I have found the past 100 days absolutely shocking, to put it politely. So I have no idea how the country will cope with even 5 years or possibly 10 years of a Labour government. The right vote is already split. For instance, in my constituency, 18,000 people voted for the Conservatives, 6,000 for Reform, but then Labour won the seat with 19,000. So the risk is that we are going to allow the left to continue to win because right-leaning votes are split. Now, I personally think that the Conservatives are a redundant party. They had long enough in power to sort the country out, and they failed to do so. They are, in my opinion, traitors to the British people. However, if we continue this power struggle between the Conservatives and Reform, and now possibly other parties, it is going to spell big trouble for the country. I can understand why Nigel Farage is appealing to the Conservatives to come over to Reform, and that makes sense, as long as these ex-Conservatives are actually willing to support the changes that need to be made. If they don't, then they should go, because drastic changes are what is needed to reform the UK. Then I want to discuss Nigel Farage, who I think is obviously an excellent operator, and he successfully impacted the political landscape, campaigning tirelessly for Brexit. I do think, however, that Farage needs to appeal to the British working class, those who have been let down by Labour and those who may support figures like Tommy Robinson, who is a popular British figure but who has been unfairly persecuted by the British establishment. Now, I can understand why Farage cannot openly support Robinson, but I think he needs to be careful not to alienate the British working class who deserve to be represented. These British working class have been ignored by the Conservatives and have been betrayed by Labour. Farage needs to remember that Robinson's supporters are also reform supporters, and I think he needs to handle this a bit better. I do not think that Richard Tice's comments went down well with some of reform's supporters, and I think there needs to be a better handling of this in the future. I also think that Farage could have said more on the case of Peter Lynch, someone who I personally do not think deserved a prison sentence and certainly did not deserve to die in prison. And although Farage is very good at what he does, I have to say I really do like some of the other members of the Reform Party. Lee Anderson, for instance, who seems a nice chap and someone who I think could appeal to the British working class. But also, I really do like Ben Habib. He seems a very down to earth, humble, honest, lovely man. He seems like he has a kind soul, and let's face it, these sorts of people are sometimes very hard to find, especially in British politics these days. I think Ben would make an excellent leader of reform. So, overall, although people may not be 100% happy with reform, I do think they are the best we have. The country and every single person living here is under massive threat, and the right in this country do need to unite. Otherwise, may be left with Labour running the country down to such an extent that it will not be able to be saved. Let me know what you think in the comments below.